Every morning at 5:45 a.m., before the sun burned the mist off the Atlantic, I walked the length of Harbor's Edge Marina with a cup of black coffee and the kind of quiet most people only hear on vacation. The docks creaked softly beneath my loafers. Ropes tapped against aluminum masts. The tide breathed in and out like it owned the place. In a way, it did. Harbor's Edge sat just outside Charleston, far enough from the tourist noise, close enough to keep property values climbing every year. On one side stretched Seabreak Point, a gated waterfront community of pastel homes, brick driveways, and American flags angled precisely at 45 degrees. On the other side rested open water and freedom. Most residents saw me and assumed I was just another boat owner. That assumption suited me fine. My name is Marcus Hale. I'm 4'2", born in South Carolina, son of a dock worker who used to say, "If you ever own the water, son, make sure you never act like it." I took that advice seriously. My yacht, Midnight Crown, sat in Slip C-17, 8 to 2 feet of matte black fiberglass and clean design. Not flashy, not gaudy, just powerful. I spent weekend polishing her myself, even though I could have hired a crew to do it. Salt under my nails reminded me I earned my place here. Because in Seabreak Point, you didn't just buy waterfront property. You were expected to belong to it. The neighborhood had changed over the last decade. Where it once held mostly retired executives and old Charleston families, it now included tech founders, surgeons, athletes, and entrepreneurs, some of us younger, some of us darker, some of us first-generation everything. That shift made certain long-time residents attentive, not openly hostile, nothing that crude, just attentive. I'd notice it in small ways. The way conversations paused half a second too long. When I joined them at the Marina fuel station, the way a neighbor once asked, "So who do you charter for?" assuming I captained someone else's yacht. The way security stopped my cousin visiting from Atlanta, but waved through 3 unfamiliar white teens without question. Small things. Nothing you could point to in court, but enough to feel. Still, my life ran smoothly. I split my time between overseeing shipping logistics contracts and maintaining the marina. I enjoyed the rhythm of it. Sunrise inspections, staff check-ins, quiet evenings watching the tide roll under Dock C. Peace. That's what I valued, which is why the laminated notice on my windshield felt so out of place. It was bright blue. Notice, updated docking compliance regulations, effective immediately. I stood there reading it twice. The Seabreak Point HOA had announced a Marine Standards Committee tasked with ensuring vessels reflected the aesthetic harmony and safety expectations of the community. Aesthetic harmony. I glanced at Midnight Crown. She was pristine, registered, insured, maintained beyond Coast Guard requirements. But she was black. Matte black hull and a marina of white yachts with navy trim. Different. I folded the notice and slipped it into my pocket. That afternoon, I saw Delene Whitmore walking the docks. HOA president, 63. Perfect posture. Pearl necklace even in humid weather. She carried authority like it had been passed down in her family. She paused near my slip, clipboard in hand. "Good afternoon, Marcus," she called sweetly. "Afternoon," I replied evenly. She studied Midnight Crown for a long moment. "We're just reviewing vessels for updated compliance," she said. "Some boats don't quite fit the character we're preserving." Character. There it was again. And what character is that? I asked calmly. "Oh, you know," she smiled. "Traditional coastal charm." I nodded slowly. Midnight Crown had cleaner lines than half the boats here, but she wasn't white fiberglass with decorative rope accents. She didn't look inherited. She looked earned. Over the next few days, more small things happened. A bright orange tag zip-tied to my dock line. Inspection pending. A neighbor casually mentioning at the mailboxes that the HOA was tightening things up. A Marina staff member telling me someone from the HOA requested access to vessel registration files. Each incident was minor on its own. Together, they formed a pattern. Friday evening, as the sky turned coral and gold, I stood on my back deck overlooking the marina. Across the water, I could see clusters of residents gathered on their patios, wine glasses in hand. Conversations floated faintly across the tide. I caught pieces of it. Property values. Standards. New crowd. I sipped my drink slowly. Seabrick Point liked to think of itself as progressive. They donated to diversity scholarships. They posted supportive statements online during national headlines. But progress feels different when it docks next to you. The following Monday, a formal letter arrived in my mailbox. It stated that Midnight Crown was under review for an authorized docking classification pending committee approval. Unauthorized? I'd been in that slip for 4 years. Paid on time. 0 violations. I ran my thumb over the embossed HOA seal and felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, clarity, because this wasn't about paperwork. It was about control, and someone on that board had decided they were entitled to it. Across the marina, I saw Deline standing on the clubhouse balcony, looking toward Dock C, toward my yacht, toward me. She gave a small wave. I returned it, calm, polite, unbothered. Let them believe the disturbance was small. Sometimes the biggest storms begin with a laminated notice and a smile that doesn't reach the eyes. By Wednesday morning, the marina looked exactly as it always had. Sunlight shimmered across the water in fractured gold. Gulls argued over scraps near the cleaning station. A retired couple from Dock A argued about bait prices the way they had every week for the past 3 years. Routine is powerful like that. It disguises tension. I walked the docks with my clipboard, greeting slip holders by name. Morning, Mr. Donnelly. Fuel pump 3's acting up again. Marcus. I'll handle it. To most people, I was simply hands-on, a meticulous yacht owner who took unusual interest in marina operations. No one questioned it. People rarely question consistency. Across the water, Seabrick Point shimmered in curated perfection. White trim porches, hydrangeas trimmed into obedient spheres. SUVs washed every Saturday like ritual offerings to property values. The marina technically operated as a separate commercial property. Different parcel, different management structure. But perception, I'd learned long ago, mattered more than paperwork. And perception in Seabrick Point was shifting. Around noon, my dockhand Javier approached me, tension written across his face. Mr. Hale, he said quietly, HOA representatives were here again. Again? They were taking pictures of boats. Mostly yours. I didn't react immediately. I just leaned against the piling and looked at Midnight Crown. Her matte black hull absorbed sunlight instead of reflecting it. Clean lines. No excessive chrome. No inherited family crest on the stern. Different. How many boats did they photograph? I asked. Yours. And Dr. Bennett, Javier said. Dr. Bennett was a black cardiologist who bought a 65-foot azimuth last year. His boat was navy blue with silver trim. Tasteful. Expensive. He'd mentioned once at the fuel dock that someone had asked him if he was leasing for a client. Small comments. Always small. I nodded. Thanks, Javier. As he walked off, I noticed 2 women standing at the far end of Dock C, watching me. They wore oversized sunglasses and coordinated tennis skates. I recognized one, Elaine Prescott, treasurer of the HOA. She looked away when our eyes met. That afternoon, an email circulated through the community listserv. Subject line, Maintaining Marine Standards. It referenced recent increases in non-traditional vessels and the need to preserve visual cohesion along the waterfront. Non-traditional. I reread that phrase 3 times. Midnight Crown met every coastal regulation, every safety code, every architectural guideline ever published by the State Marina Authority. But she wasn't pastel. And I wasn't legacy. That evening, I attended the weekly sunset gathering near the clubhouse, something I rarely skipped. Presence matters. Wine glasses clinked. Laughter floated lightly. Someone played soft jazz through outdoor speakers. When I approached, conversation dipped. Not fully silent, just recalibrated. Marcus. Deline Whitmore called warmly, gliding toward me. We were just discussing the new marine guidelines. I saw the email, I replied calmly. Yes. Well, she said, lowering her voice slightly, we've had some concerns about appearances. Appearances. She gestured subtly toward the marina. We want everything to feel cohesive, elegant. You understand. Behind her, a man muttered, We didn't move here from Miami. A few chuckles followed. I held Delene's gaze. Are you referring to a specific vessel? Her smile tightened. Not at all. This isn't personal. It never is, at first. Dr. Bennett stood near the railing, silent, his jaw set. Our eyes met briefly. Shared understanding passed between us without words. Later that night, as the tide rolled and under a near full moon, I sat alone on Midnight Crown's upper deck. The Marina lights reflected like fractured constellations, peaceful, almost serene. But beneath that calm, I felt movement. Disturbances rarely begin loudly. They begin administratively. The next morning, I found a laminated orange notice zip tied to my dock cleat. Vessel under review, docking authorization pending. Unauthorized docking. That phrase again. I removed it carefully, folding it without tearing the plastic. Tom, the Marina operations manager, approached from behind. You want me to handle this? He asked quietly. I looked out over the slips. At the uniform rows of white yachts. At the American flags flapping in synchronized rhythm. At Midnight Crown standing unapologetically different among them. Not yet, I said. Across the water, I saw 2 HOA board members walking with a contractor I didn't recognize. They were measuring something along Dock C. Measuring. Planning. Foreshadowing doesn't announce itself. It lingers at the edges of routine until you recognize the pattern. That afternoon, I reviewed property maps in my home office overlooking the marina. Parcel boundaries. Ownership lines. Easements. Clean. Unambiguous. Still, the HOA moved as though authority were theirs by assumption alone, because often in places like Seabrick Point, assumption becomes power if left unchallenged. As dusk settled, I walked the docks again. A few residents nodded politely. One older gentleman gave me a longer look than usual, then quickly turned away. Change makes people uncomfortable, but control makes them bold. The marina remained calm. Boats rocked gently. Lines hummed in the breeze. On the surface, nothing had happened. No confrontation. No raised voices. No official penalties. Just notices. Emails. Photographs. Measurements. Small disturbances. But I'd grown up around docks long enough to know something about water. When the tide pulls back too quietly, it's not retreating. It's gathering. By the end of the week, Harbor's Edge Marina looked like it always did in late spring. Polished, postcard perfect. Deceptively calm. Saturday mornings were my favorite. Charter captains prepped coolers before sunrise. Families carried folding chairs down the docks. The smell of sunscreen mixed with diesel and salt. It was honest work and honest leisure, coexisting without pretense. I made my usual round just after 6. Dock A, retirees comparing fishing knots. Dock B, a young tech couple arguing softly about whether to upgrade to a larger vessel. Dock C, Midnight Crown, steady and silent in her slip. Routine. Predictable. But tension had become a background frequency, low enough that most wouldn't hear it, loud enough that I couldn't ignore it. As I approached my yacht, I noticed something new. 2 small white chalk marks on the dock planks beside her berth. Measurements. Again. I crouched, ran my thumb across one. Fresh. Behind me, I heard heels clicking on wood. Marcus, came Darlene Whitmore's voice, smooth as ever. I stood slowly. Morning. She was accompanied by a tall man in a light blue polo with a clipboard tucked under his arm. He looked like the type who charged consultation fees for saying obvious things. We're conducting a structural review, she explained. There are concerns about weight distribution along Dock C. Dock C has been reinforced twice in 5 years. I replied evenly. You'd know that if you reviewed the maintenance logs. The consultant avoided my eyes. Well, Darlene said lightly, we can't be too careful. Of course not. The marina had hosted yachts larger than mine for regattas without issue. But those boats were temporary. Visitors, not fixtures. Midnight Crown was permanent. Visible. Owned. I assume this review applies to all vessels on Dock C. I asked. A pause. We're starting with the ones most visually impactful, she said. There it was again. That careful vocabulary. Visually impactful. Behind her, a couple walking their golden retriever slowed just enough to listen. The husband gave me a polite nod, then quickly tugged the leash and moved on. Confrontation makes spectators uncomfortable. After they left, I turned back to my yacht. She's compliant with every maritime regulation, I said calmly. If you have specific concerns, submit them in writing. The lean smile thinned. We will. As they walked away, I caught fragments of their conversation. Community standards. Property values. Wrong message. Wrong message. By midday, the marina filled with the usual hum of weekend life. Kids laughed near the bait shop. A group of older men debated stock portfolios on the fuel dock. Someone blasted classic rock from a pontoon boat, and nobody complained. From a distance, Seabrick Point looked progressive, integrated, harmonious. But harmony can be curated. At the Marina Cafe, I ran into Dr. Bennett again. He stirred his coffee slowly, gaze fixed on the water. They inspected mine yesterday, he said quietly. Full weight distribution. I asked. He gave a humorless smile. For aesthetic compliance. We stood there in silence for a moment. I've practiced cardiology in this state for 18 years, he continued. Saved half the people in that clubhouse from heart attacks. But suddenly my boat doesn't fit the aesthetic. I nodded once. They are testing boundaries. I said, yours or mine? Both. That evening, a formal letter arrived, not in the mailbox this time, but hand-delivered in a sealed envelope taped to Midnight Crown's gangway. Final notice, unauthorized docking. Failure to comply may result in removal. Removal. The word lingered longer than the others had. I read it twice under the fading orange sky. Unauthorized. 4 years in the same slip. Paid invoices. 0 violations. But authority often belongs to whoever acts first and asks permission later. Across the Marina Basin, residents gathered for the weekly Sunset Wine Social. Laughter carried lightly across the water. From this distance, they looked unified. Up close, lines were clearer. Clusters formed predictably, legacy families together, newcomers orbiting cautiously. Conversations about philanthropy and coastal preservation flowed easily, but topics shifted subtly when certain people joined. I'd grown used to navigating that rhythm, choosing when to engage, when to observe. Control doesn't require noise. As darkness settled, I climbed to Midnight Crown's upper deck and sat alone. The marina lights flickered on one by one. Reflections shimmered across black water. My yacht stood distinct among rows of white hulls, absorbing light rather than broadcasting it. Different, intentional. A small motorboat idled past, its driver slowing just enough to look up at me. Curious. Assessing. Rumors travel fast in gated communities, especially when someone decides you don't belong. Around 9 p.m., Tom called. You should see this, he said. See what? The HOA scheduled an emergency board vote Monday morning. Closed session. On what grounds? Marina compliance enforcement. That's all it says. Closed session. Enforcement. Small disturbances had evolved into formal language. I leaned back in my deck chair and looked out over harbor's edge. My father used to tell me that water doesn't argue. It reshapes shorelines quietly over time. But sometimes, when barriers are built in the wrong place, water doesn't erode. It crashes. From the clubhouse balcony, I saw silhouettes watching Dock C, watching Midnight Crown, watching me. They thought they were protecting something. They didn't realize they were provoking it. And the most dangerous mistake you can make is assuming the man standing calmly on the deck doesn't own the tide beneath you. Monday morning arrived windless and bright, the kind of coastal stillness that makes everything look suspended in glass. I woke at 5:30 out of habit, brewed coffee, and stepped onto my back deck overlooking Harbor's Edge Marina. The tide was slack, barely moving. Boats rested heavy in their slips, lines hanging with loose confidence. Peaceful, predictable. That was the illusion. From this angle, Seabrick Point looked like a magazine spread, coastal elegance in muted tones, pale blue shutters, crisp white trim, lawns trimmed with mathematical precision, American flags catching early sunlight. Order, that's what they valued most. And order, historically, has often meant deciding who fits neatly inside it. I made my usual dock walk, greeting early fishermen and nodding to the maintenance crew. Routine was important. It told observers that nothing rattled me. At Dock C, Midnight Crown waited, silent and composed. Her matte black hull reflected the sunrise in soft gradients rather than glare. She didn't scream wealth. She suggested authority. As I stepped aboard to check lines, I noticed something different. 2 heavy-duty orange notices bolted, not taped, to the dock post beside my slip. Docking privileges revoked, removal scheduled. Bolted. Not zip-tied. Not laminated. Bolted. I traced a metal edge with my finger, cam settling into something sharper. Across the Marina basin, the clubhouse balcony filled slowly with silhouettes. The HOA board meeting was already underway. Closed session, as Tom had warned. I could see Darlene Whitmore at the head of the long table through the glass. She leaned forward as she spoke, posture immaculate, expression resolved. This had been building, not because of safety, not because of weight distribution, but because control, once challenged by difference, seeks reinforcement. By 8:15 a.m., a flatbed truck rolled into the Marina parking lot, followed by a crane vehicle bearing the logo of a marine salvage company. That escalated quickly. Several residents gathered near the dock entrance, coffee cups in hand, curiosity barely disguised a concern. Morning, one man said to me cautiously, didn't realize there was an issue. There isn't, I replied evenly. The crane operator approached with paperwork. Here for vessel removal, he said, scanning his clipboard. HOA authorization. I took the document from his hand. It was stamped with the Seabrit Point HOA seal, signed by Darlene Whitmore. No Marina authorization, no commercial property approval, no county order, just assumption. Behind me, whispers floated through the humid air. I heard it violated guidelines. Something about aesthetics. Shame. It's a bit much for this Marina. A bit much. Dr. Bennett stood near the bait shop, arms crossed. He didn't speak, but his presence was deliberate. The crane operator cleared his throat. You want us to proceed? I looked out across the water. Seabrit Point residents lined the boardwalk now, forming a quiet audience. Some curious, some satisfied, some uncomfortable but silent. Racial dynamics rarely explode openly in communities like this. They manifest in paperwork, in committees, in language designed to sound neutral while targeting precisely. Unauthorized, non-traditional, visually impactful. I handed the clipboard back. Go ahead and wait, I said calmly. For what? For clarity. At 8:42 a.m., Tom arrived carrying a leather portfolio. He didn't rush, didn't dramatize, just walked steadily down Docksy and handed me the folder. Inside were property deeds, parcel maps, and commercial registration documents, certified copies, ownership records for Harbor's Edge Marina, every slip, every piling, every dock. I closed the folder gently. Then I turned, not toward the crane operator, but toward the clubhouse balcony. Darlene was watching. Our eyes met across the water. I raised the folder slightly, just enough for her to recognize it. Even from this distance, I saw the shift in her posture. Confusion, calculation, a flicker of realization. I spoke loudly enough for those nearest to hear, voice calm and measured. This marina is privately owned commercial property, I said. Any vessel removal requires authorization from the property owner. A murmur rippled through the small crowd. The crane operator looked uncertain. So, we were contracted by the HOA. I'm sure you were, I replied, but they don't own the docks. Silence spread outward like a stone dropped in still water. On the balcony, chairs scraped abruptly. The board members huddled together, papers flipping quickly now. Assumption had finally met documentation. I stepped onto Midnight Crown's deck and looked out over Harbor's Edge. The morning was still beautiful. Sunlight glinted off white hulls. Pelicans drifted lazily near the breakwater. Peace hadn't left, but illusion had. For weeks, they'd tested boundaries quietly, through notices, inspections, language crafted to sound procedural. Small disturbances meant to push me toward compliance. They thought I was simply a resident who needed reminding of his place. They never asked who owned the water beneath them. The crane engine shut off. The salvage crew stepped back. Across the marina, spectators dispersed slowly, conversations hushed now, recalibrating. Darlene remained on the balcony a moment longer, staring toward Dock C. Control had slipped, and in communities built on perceived hierarchy, that realization landed heavier than any yacht. I ran a hand along Midnight Crown's railing and breathed in salt air. Routine would return. The docks would creak tomorrow morning just as they always had. But something fundamental had shifted, because sometimes the most powerful move isn't raising your voice. It's letting people discover, far too late, that the authority they tried to exercise was never theirs to begin with.